And now, the moment that we've all been waiting for has come. Our first session of the day, Growing Through Uncertainty. For our first session of the plenary at the UEF World Summit 2020, we have as our moderator, the President of the UEF Chamber of Commerce and the backbone behind all our efforts, Mr. Ahmed Buhari, the Founder, President and CEO of the Coal and Oil Group. Sir, with you as moderator for the first session, I'm sure the UEF World Summit is going to get off to a flying start. I now hand over to our moderator, Mr. Ahmed Buhari, to introduce the speakers and start the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tawseef. That was a wonderful introduction. So good morning to all of you. Good evening, Vanakkam, and Assalamu alaikum. I do hope you are all well rested and had enjoyed the ceremony yesterday, the inaugural ceremony. You must have heard the Honorable Industries Minister, His Excellency Dr. Bandar Hajjar, who came live from Jeddah, as you must have seen. Mr. Deepak Bagla, with the wonderful views that he was sharing about the Indian economy. I think what he said was perfectly in alignment with our thought process, growing during uncertainty. He told us about the FDIs which are coming in, which has been probably one of the highest in anywhere in the world, clearly showing that India is on an uptick as we go forward. So we had a wonderful time yesterday. So I hope you all enjoyed it. So anyway, today's session is something I'm sure which is in everybody's mind. Uncertainty, what is going to happen, how are things going to pan out nationally, how are things going to pan out internationally, what is going to happen to our jobs, to our lives, and a whole lot of things which is on top of all our minds. So for me personally, I'm a total sort of, what shall I say, made in crisis person, right? For me, every crisis has been an opportunity. I know my team is sick of hearing it from me all the time. Whenever there's a problem, I tell them, hey, look, there's going to be some opportunity in this. And some, Buddhist philosopher once told me, he says, look, you have to really look in an opportunity, in a crisis. There are probably 20 solutions for any problem that you face during a crisis. And believe me, I've been counting the 20 solutions, after every problem that I've had. And, it is remarkable the number of possibilities which open up after a crisis. So today's session is therefore titled Growing During Uncertainty. So when we were curating this program, my dear friend, Mr. Azmat Tawfiq, he came and pointed out and he said, oh, y'all are saying, COVID and crisis, and as if it's a one-off thing which is happening. But you know what? Crisis and sort of, what shall I say? Uncertainty is today the name of the game. No matter where we go, and this is irrespective of the crisis we are facing here, I think we'll have to learn to live with uncertainty. So that's why we said it's growing during uncertainty, because it's going to be an ongoing thing. Today it's a COVID, tomorrow it may be something else, and a whole lot of other things. So Winston Churchill famously said, never let a good crisis go to a waste. He said, never let a good crisis go to a waste. So what are the opportunities in this crisis? Global realignment, new president in the United States coming up shortly, companies shifting out of China, Chennai finding new companies coming, large investments coming. Yesterday, I was very pleasantly surprised to read Tata Communications wants to invest $1.5 billion for setting up a new phone company in Tamil Nadu. This is on top of Foxconn's $1 billion investment. All this is happening during the crisis. Middle Eastern investors. Yesterday, we heard Dr. Bandar Hajjar. He was mentioning about the Gulf region, looking at active investments in India. So, the possibilities seem endless, the number of things which can actually happen during this crisis. So today, we've got a really eminent panel of speakers from all over the world. We have Dr. Rangarajan, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Mr. Ayman Sejani of the Islamic Development Bank, ICD, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, and veterans of this stature who are going to speak to us today. I really must thank all of them for having taken so much of time and effort to participate with us. So before we hear the veterans speak, let me just run a small video on the session. It's not too long, just a short video, and then we'll open up for the first speaker. So video, please.
The world has seen several economic crises in the last century. The Great Depression of 1929, the dot-com bubble in the 2000s, the subprime crisis in 2008, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. Global crisis can be a leveler and a great differentiator depending on how countries react and people react. India is currently the fifth largest economy in the world at $2.9 trillion with plans to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025. While the task looks tough due to COVID, there is no denial that India has significant potential to grow despite this. Lockdowns have forced digital transformation of our workspaces and our daily lives forever. Governments, institutions, and businesses no doubt need to become stronger and resilient by redesigning and restructuring how they operate. This throws open a plethora of opportunities in online work, telemedicine, e-learning, and digital customer experience. In crisis, there is always opportunity. Are we able to see it?
Thank you very much for the lovely video. As you can see, now we've got a lovely face on the camera. I hope you're able to see her. First and foremost, I'd like to very warmly welcome Dr. Sangeeta Reddy. Very happy that she was one of the first ones to immediately accept our invitation upon our request to speak at this event. First and foremost, their family and Sangeeta and everybody are dear family friends for over 3-4 decades. Our fathers were great friends starting from in the 70s, and we are neighbors in Chennai. And so it's a real pleasure that we have Dr. Sangeeta Reddy here. She's currently serving as the president of the FICCI, one of the only handful of women ever to do so. I did some research and found out there are not too many there. She's currently the joint managing director of Apollo Hospitals Enterprises, has a doctorate from Macquarie University in Australia, actively involved in humanitarian work, entrepreneurial initiatives, and a whole lot of other things. I think I can keep going on and on about her, but let us first hear Dr. Sangeeta Reddy. I believe she has to go to a Prime Minister's meeting, but I'm glad she made time for us to come and speak today. So, Sangeeta Reddy, doctor, please, stage is all yours.
So, good morning, namaste, salam alaikum, vanakkam. Very happy to be with all of you, and thank you, Ahmed Buhari. Like you rightly said, our relationship and our friendship has spanned generations, and I hope will continue to do so. Let me begin by congratulating you on the UEF Virtual World Summit, growing through uncertainty. I think it's a tremendous topic in a very difficult time. And the underlying theme of finding strength, of finding ways to grow and never wasting a crisis are clearly some of the most important things that all of us as businesses across the world must do. I want to begin by saying that in my period as FICCI president, I realized one very important thing, that when we grow business, when we look to expand our horizons in our businesses, we do so not just for our own companies, not just for our own personal gratification or the wealth creation of our family. We do so because I strongly believe that business is the critical linkage between the public, the humanity, the civilization, and the government policy and the GDP. It is industry, businessmen and women who make this translation and enable value creation and wealth and improvement in the quality of lives of people at large. Because when we grow a business, we employ more people. When we employ more people, we provide them with livelihood, with means to educate their children, to buy some of the basic necessities, and then go on to luxury. So business is about impacting people and the economy and improving the quality of life. And with that realization came to me a renewed purpose to assist in the growth of all businesses at large. So it's been a very interesting year at FICCI. Despite the COVID pandemic, we have focused on finding ways to interact with the government, who have been very, very proactive. And I'm going to share some of those thoughts, and worked towards first saving lives and then moving on to focus on livelihoods. So just jumping straight in, all of us know that the year 2000 has been, extremely challenging for everyone. And it is in these challenging times that people have found ways to keep moving. But the speed, the virality, and the impact of the COVID-19 contagion was unprecedented. And there was no standard playbook for pandemic management. Every day brought new information, new challenges. Me as a healthcare provider, our teams were looking, should we give remdesivir? What is a steroid? What is HCQ? If America is using it, shouldn't we be looking at it? The range of options, how do you convert normal beds into ICU beds? And then at a national level, coordination between the government and the state, policy, affordability, testing, how do you ramp up testing? Should you open flights, not open flights? I think never before have we been faced with a barrage of options, decision-making, which impacted lives in such a manner. And I think one of the big learnings from this was the need to face head-on, to stay centered and grounded on the impact on public, but also to learn to cooperate and collaborate and to put the best brains together to keep finding appropriate solutions. So teamwork has really been the name of the game during this pandemic. And the definition of teamwork, I think, spans within an organization, across organizations, from private sector to government, and then also global cooperation. When India sent medication across the world and other countries shared with India, we realized that ultimately we are all one world and one humanity. And I think that is the spirit also of your conference. So once again, Buhari, congratulations for putting this together. Now, just jumping straight in, I think unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. And during this initial phase of the pandemic, India took the path of one of the strictest lockdowns that has ever been done anywhere in the world. And during this time, the strategy really paid off, because what happened is that we were able to, ramp up in terms of the PPEs. India at the time when the pandemic started, we used to manufacture less than 10,000 PPEs per day. Today, we are manufacturing over 4.5 lakh PPEs. And not only that, it's enough for the Indian ecosystem, but also we're able to export this. Like this, across cleaning agents, ventilators, medication, all these have been ramped up. And with the joint efforts over time, we've got a good grip of the situation on the ground. Hopefully, we will be averting a third wave of this scenario. And recovery rates are among the best in the world, over 94%. Mortality rates among the lowest. The national mortality rate is around 1.5%. And I'm happy to share with you that at Apollo, our mortality rate is under 0.5%, despite receiving some of the most critical patients. But finally, I mean, looking at the impact of this pandemic, what is really, the situation that we're all in? And while I began by saying that there is light at the end of the tunnel, I must say that the end is not clearly visible. We are looking at the next 3, 4, 5 weeks that vaccination will start. However, how much? How do we scale to give about 400 to 500 million vaccinations? The supply chain and all those plannings are happening in India now on a tremendous basis. It is lucky that India is home to 60% of the vaccine production of the world. And therefore, we can visualize that we will have access to the vaccine. It will be cost effective. There will be a dual strategy of free for some people, paying by some. However, there will be a prioritization list of those who need it first, with that prioritization starting with healthcare workers, going on to the most vulnerable population, the elderly, those with comorbidities, and in a structured, phased, planned, and IT-enabled manner, this will go across the ecosystem. The economic shock, I'm very happy to say, after the first quarter where we saw the GDP contraction of almost 24%, everyone was truly worried. However, the second quarter quickly came in and the contraction has been lower than 7.5%. Agriculture and manufacturing have all ramped up, and actually throughout the pandemic, agri sector grew by 3.4% in Q4. And now the manufacturing sector grew by 0.6%. So this means that we are slowly returning to a positive growth terrain, and this is encouraging. Services sector began a whole new wave from work to home to contactless service, and a whole new economy is spawning out of this concept of contactless care or contactless service. And while the service sector, still has a weaker than before performance, primarily because of deep contraction in trade, hotels, and transport. And it's currently at minus 15%, but again, there it's beginning to pick up, starting with the air bubbles and going on. The government has been doing some tremendous work in these areas. I want to focus on a few areas where I believe that the combination of industry speaking to government being proactive and thinking through policies, is really setting us on a new path for a very, very positive beginning to 2021. We are, a few months away from a new year, and the green shoots of recovery have already begun. The GST collection has been robust over the last 3 months, and I think that is important. But all other indicators, whether it is the rise in the e-way bill volumes, the PMI manufacturing, services now slowly coming up, all these have registered, positive movement. And going by the current trends, it's expected to turn positive in Q4 of this fiscal year. We will not be able to completely reverse the negatives of Q1. And the year 2021 was definitely going to be a negative. However, we are well poised for a positive growth in the financial year 21-22. So looking at that, I just want to very quickly share a few thoughts. The first one, I think, is really manufacturing. And in the beginning, we would always say that India was unable to be competitive in manufacturing because the cost of acquisition of land, the labor laws, the cost of logistics was up to 9 to 11% compared to 3% globally, and of course the cost of capital was much higher. Realizing and understanding these problems, the government started off with the concept of Atmanirbhar, so to boost manufacturing sector, went on to very quickly put in the framework of the PLI scheme. And it is on the back of the PLI scheme that significant moves like Apple moving one of their largest manufacturing facilities into India, Foxtron, Buhari, what you referred to, all these are happening also on the back of the PLI scheme. And I would urge all of you to please study the nuances of the PLI scheme, and FICCI will be happy to share and send that to you. We have a good conference coming up in 2 weeks on deciphering what the PLI means. But all these are positive steps which are encouraging. We're now looking for one more thing besides the labor laws, the land, the development of the logistics infrastructure with the last mile connectivity, which is going to be another game changer, and the fact that large tracts of land are being allocated by state governments for parks. In Karnataka, we are doing a large industrial park focused on MSME. We're looking at 5 other parks across the country with a specialized focus. The Karnataka park is focused on FMCG, and the other 5 parks are going to be focused on MSME with common facilities and special tax incentives as well as special economic zones so that we can become a greater part of the global value chain. I must also say that, Chennai and the entire Tamil Nadu is definitely very well positioned. In fact, in my meetings with the embassies in Korea, Japan, the ambassadors say clearly that they've had a good experience in Chennai. And so Japanese companies are looking to ramp up what they are doing in these states. So Chennai can definitely look forward to some positive growth in the manufacturing sector. Moving forward very quickly, I think the digital economy is something where India has a huge opportunity. The exponential growth of digital and the fact that the world is changing on the back of Moore's law, the computation capacity is changing the entire discussion. We used to speak about mega trends, but today, because of terabytes, you will be speaking about teta trends, which is the pace of change. Digital has really been an inflection point for the unprecedented development of many, many sectors. And while some of India's most persistent challenges can be solved by digital innovation, so the India Stack and the UPI, which the government has put forward, are going to be transformational, especially in fintech, but also with Aadhaar and the JAM Trinity because of the extensive pervasiveness of the mobile phone. This ability to have impact on healthcare, education, waste management, transportation, logistics, water management, each one of these sectors, and of course the entire retail sector is being redefined on the back of this, and e-commerce is just changing the way that people transact. And interestingly, this is not just focused on the large cities of India. Tier 2 and tier 3 cities and rural India is playing a very big role in this entire scenario. So as we aim for a $5 trillion economy, digital is poised to contribute over 1 trillion of this. And the government has already laid the foundation for unlocking value in new age sectors like artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things. The time is apt for us to unleash the scope of digitalization, to invest in digital infrastructure, and for each one of us in our own individual companies. I will say that at Apollo, we're doing a complete digital transformation. Our mobile app is becoming one of the most powerful methodologies for us to stay in touch. During the pandemic, all our doctors shifted online. So today you can sit in the comfort of your home anywhere in the world and consult with an Apollo physician. So these are changes which are here to stay. Even post-pandemic, some of these are going to remain. And it's important for us as companies to adopt, absorb, and accelerate the pace of this utilization for our customers' sake. One of the key objectives also of public policy will be the digitalization of industry, especially MSME. And again, this is an area that FICCI is working on very significantly, plus the potential of manufacturing 4.0, whether it's robotics, new age material, technical textiles. There are detailed reports on each one of these, and we will be happy to share them with you. Very quickly moving forward, I want to put one quick highlight on agriculture. India has the potential to be the food bowl of the world. Agri has seen growth despite economic slowdown, and sustainable development of agriculture is critical. The new policies and the focus being given across the ecosystem, whether it's value addition, cold chain focus, as well as enhanced scientific applications in agriculture and a fresh look at the approach of agri-biotechnology. All these augur very well for the sector. Moving on, I think healthcare is something I must speak about. I believe that India and the Indian healthcare system, both public and private, have handled the pandemic extremely well. And we are poised for the next phase of growth, where digital is going to play a very major role. The government of India's national digital health stack, as well as Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is creating a universal health coverage plan. These combined with the fact that there will be advanced diagnostics. Chennai is the city that has the first proton machine. Apollo was privileged to bring to country, to serve the country and surrounding countries with the proton, which is one of the most advanced treatments for cancer. So India will become a major hub for medical tourism. And telehealth, tele-ICU, tele-radiology, all these are emerging very, very fast. Moving on to education, this will maybe be the last focus area. There are lots of others, but I realize that you have such an outstanding lineup of speakers. I just want to highlight once the importance of education. Next week, FICCI is having our annual convention. The Honorable Prime Minister will be inaugurating this convention. But here one of our sessions is the Edu Revolution, because this is changing like never before. Virtual education which has been the savior for millions of students in this current year. But the success of it, the ability to do that, if we come up with hybrid models of online as well as physical, this can help us fill the teacher gap, enhance the reach of education, make education and learning a continuous process, and then convert our demographic dividend. We have 17 million youth coming into the workforce every year. This is a potential disaster if we're unable to engage them. But if we use this power and train them on new age skills, train them for a global workforce, this demographic dividend can become a very major saving factor or a contributory factor to the economy. So whenever we think of education, please let us think of an education revolution and the future of jobs. So we train for the future of jobs, and therefore every one of our children in India who have studied have a chance to get a good job. To conclude, and I will conclude because, like I said, you have an outstanding lineup of speakers. There are great opportunities that as we move along, the inherent economic strengths and the resilience of our country remain intact. We have a large consumer market. We have an enterprising spirit of Indian businesses who time and again have come forward and conquered, business in India, but also when you go abroad, like Mr. Buhari's family, Mr. Rahman, what he did when he went to Dubai and to the Middle East. So this spirit of entrepreneurship of Indian business is, I think, one of our biggest strengths. And the government is now looking to nurture that talent and strength, unleash it, be supportive and responsive to industry issues, create structural reforms which will help us, really bring to fore this power. And I have no doubt that the Indian economy and business will come out of this crisis much sooner than the world thinks, and we will embark on a higher growth trajectory and be capable of reaching our $5 trillion mark sometime in the next few years. But more importantly also, I think that we will do so with inclusivity. We will carry our population. We will incorporate sustainable environment development goals, and we will take a place in the world economy and in the world stage. And we will take that place with respect, with the use of science on the foundations of our culture, and really together help to build a better world for ourselves, but most importantly for our future generations. You all saw that on the cover of the Time magazine was a young girl, a 15-year-old girl of Indian origin, American girl, for her input in science. And it is those fine young minds, it is for them that we must create this better world. So with my best wishes to all of you, my congratulations for the conference, my hopes for an outstanding 2021 for each one of you, and good health, stay safe, stay well, and thank you for this opportunity to interact. Namaste, Vanakkam.
Thank you so much. I think that's like the Prime Minister and the Commerce Minister and the Agriculture Minister and the Education Minister, all of them speaking at the same time, topped up with a view from the FICCI and all other chambers put together. Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, that's been a fantastic speech that you gave. Thank you so much. I think you're like our own Kamala Harris, if not more, I'm sure. I just have one question before you leave. I know you have to leave right away. Two very important items. Our youth and our women. What is that they need to do to really take advantage of the 5 trillion, of the 10 trillion, of the startup policies, all the policies which are coming up, what do you think they have to do to really, sort of ride this wave rather than sort of be on the sidelines, of what all that is happening? So if you can just share a view on that, please.
Thank you for that super great question, Buhari. I think you've gone to the crux of the thing. I think the first one is stay positive. The second is stay aware of the changes that are happening and use those changes in policy, in mindset, in capability, in opportunity, and drive towards that. For women, at FICCI, I have launched this year what we are calling the greater 50%. Because while women make up only 48% of the population, I believe their impact across is greater than 50% because they have this soft power and they are capable in the new knowledge economy to stand shoulder to shoulder with any individual. and for the sake of society. So women make up 50% of our demographic. If we fly like a bird with one wing tied behind the back, we will only fly to half our potential. So let's unleash the power of women and let both men and women together contribute to society. And for that, primarily, I think it is a positivity, it is an awareness, it's a cooperation and collaboration, and using the positive policy framework to move forward, to come out of your normal comfort zones and start businesses and do so for the sake of society. I reiterate where I began. So business is not for the sake of our own personal family wealth anymore. Business is so that we can create employment. Business is so that we can raise the GDP and therefore raise the quality of living of the world. Business is so that we can find ways to save lives and touch lives. And that is the power. So when we go with that positive framework, all the negativity around, sometimes people think that businesses are greedy, selfish, unethical. We have to remove that mindset and say that we are partners in the progress of the world. And men, women, children, and of course, the entire, leadership, governments, industry, we have to start working together. And that, I think, is what COVID has really taught us. What I said, that it's a team, and it's a team for the sake of the world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy. That's fantastic. I just have to say one thing here. You and your sisters are such inspiration for the country, for every single lady that I've heard of. And what you all are doing is really, really appreciated. I hear it from so many of them. So you have been, total inspiration, your family, your father. Thank you so much. We don't want to keep you any longer. And please, do have a fantastic day ahead. And we look forward to having you sometime at the UEF for another session. Thank you so much.
Congratulations for the great work you and your entire association is doing, and good luck for the summit. It looks fantastic.
Thank you so much.
It looks beautifully put together. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Namaskar. Bye-bye. Right. You heard, oh my God, I think Dr. Sangeeta Reddy has pretty much covered the entire, whatever we had to say in the entire summit for the next 2 days. I think she's covered everything. I mean, growing during uncertainty couldn't have been better defined by what she said. I think really we need to sit and listen to every single word of what she spoke of. I think it's really fantastic session. So without much ado, I think let's get on to our, eminent panel of speakers. Next, we have somebody who, again, the speakers that we have, and I really think we're very fortunate to have speakers of this stature agree to come and speak at the UEF World Summit for each and every one of you, for us. And I think, we must be very thankful for all of them for having come here today to speak to us. Next is our very own Dr. C. Rangarajan. He doesn't require any introduction, but I must say it. What can I say? Where do I start? Padma Vibhushan, multiple doctorates, Governor Andhra Pradesh, Governor Tamil Nadu, Reserve Bank Governor, advisor to the government on several aspects, several policies and whatnot, chairman of the Madras School of Economics. I'll never forget when I met Dr. Rangarajan. I'm not sure whether he remembers, just many years ago, I was very fortunate to be invited to the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's event, and along with Sonia ji and everybody were there at that big event. Of course, I just got to say hello to them. I met Dr. Rangarajan there, and there I just went to him and all I said is, "Sir, I'm from Tamil Nadu. I'm doing blah 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 ABC." And then without any hesitation, he said, if you want anything to do with Tamil Nadu, anything to do for development, you must come to me. I'm always available. And true to his word, when we approached Dr. Rangarajan to speak at the conference, he readily agreed. And, you will hear all that he has to say. Oh my God, that was another fantastic speech. So let's hear what Dr. Rangarajan has to say about what's going on during this uncertainty. So Dr. Rangarajan, please.
Friends, greetings to all of you. I must at the outset congratulate the United Economic Forum on organizing this summit, which will examine the problems that India and the rest of the world are facing today and will be facing tomorrow. We are meeting at a time when India and the entire world is passing through a difficult phase. The economic crisis that we are all facing today is very different from the crisis that we have seen earlier. In recent memory, this is the first economic crisis that has been triggered by a non-economic factor, a pandemic. To prevent the spread of COVID-19, governments have to take many measures, including lockdown. It is this severe lockdown which has led to the grinding halt of all economic activities. As a consequence, the output of every economy has been falling. It is quite clearly seen in our own country. In Q1 of 2020-21, the Indian economy contracted by 23.9%. That was a period during which the lockdown was most severe. As the restrictions were loosened, in the second quarter, the economy shrank by 7.5%. Therefore, unless we find a way to relax the restrictions, the economies will suffer. Going ahead, as far as India is concerned, perhaps Q3 will be slightly better, and Q4 can also be even better than that. A colleague of mine and I have estimated, probably taking the year as a whole, the shrinkage of the economy may be between 6 and 7% instead of 10% and above, which was forecast by many countries, many organizations. But we have to fight the virus. We have to take care of the people who are affected by the crisis. We need vaccine. We need drugs to cure the people who have been affected. Therefore, prevention and care are two things which are needed, and we must try our best to get the necessary thing going so that the coronavirus is brought under control. But in the situation that we are facing today, what can be done? What are the policy instruments that are available to take care of the situation? The two important policy instruments are monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary policy tries to influence the economy by influencing the level of interest rate and the availability of credit or money. Given the situation of a weak demand in the system, the Reserve Bank of India has been, through various measures, trying to lower the interest rate and expand the liquidity available to the banking system so that they can lend to a larger number of borrowers. The policy rate has been brought down by 115 basis points in the recent period. Liquidity has been made available through various measures such as the reduction in the cash reserve ratio and also instituting a number of refinancing facilities. On the whole, the policy of the Reserve Bank of India in trying to take care of this situation is the right direction. But the fact is that monetary policy has also a limited role to play in a situation like this. The Reserve Bank of India can make available more credit to the more funds to the banking system, and the banks may be willing to provide additional credit. But the amount of credit that will actually be taken up depends upon the borrowers also. As the old saying goes, you can take the horse to the pond but cannot compel it to drink. So the monetary authority can make available more liquidity, more credit, but to the extent which it will be absorbed will also depend upon what the borrowers, that is what the enterprises are planning to do. And that is why there is an old saying which records that the monetary system has efficient brakes, but the accelerator is uncertain. The other issue that arises is we need to provide more credit, and banks must be willing to do that. But at the same time, the banks have to be careful. Banks must look at the viability of the projects before lending. Banks should neither be adventurous nor timid. They must strike an appropriate balance. The loans of today should not become NPAs of tomorrow. This is not an argument against lending by banks. This is only a note of caution. Banks need to be active and to provide credit. The second instrument in this context is a fiscal policy. And fiscal policy certainly has an important role to play in a situation where there is a weakening of demand. This is the old, well-tested Keynesian prescription. The expenditures that the government will have to incur in this situation are threefold. First, there are the healthcare expenditures, expanding the hospital facilities, installing more equipment, medical equipment such as ventilators, and many other things. And the government should not stint. All these need to be provided. Second, there are some relief expenditures which the government in any country must be willing to come forward and provide. There are vulnerable groups which have been severely affected. The pandemic and the lockdown have resulted in a number of people being thrown out of jobs, and therefore they need to be taken care of. And finally, there are expenditures which are classified or characterized as stimulating expenditures, or stimulants as they call it, and which the government should undertake. The first two are must. And the third is also equally important, but the first two are must. Now, what is the problem? The problem perhaps arises because of the fact that at a time when more expenditures have to be incurred, the revenues of the government are also going down. Because of the pandemic, there is no economic activity, or the economic activity is in a lower gear, and as a consequence, the revenues of the government are also going down. For example, the budget of the central government for 2021 was based on the assumption that the nominal income of this country will grow by 10%. But the nominal income of the country is not likely to grow at all, even in nominal terms, in the current year. Therefore, the revenues are falling, and at the same time, the expenditures are increasing. This can and this will result in the fiscal deficit being large. In a situation like the one that we are facing, despite the fact that the fiscal deficit will be large, expenditures will have to be incurred. And there is also another problem. If there is a larger amount of borrowing, fiscal deficit essentially means borrowing. How will this be met? To some extent, the need for support by the Reserve Bank of India will become necessary. And therefore, a certain amount of monetization of the debt is also inevitable. But this is an extraordinary year. We are facing an extraordinary situation. Therefore, some prudential rules are to be relaxed, but this must be a one-time relaxation and not a permanent feature. Let us also say that the Indian economy started slowing down even before COVID-19. In 2019-20, the rate of growth of the economy was 4.2%, reminiscent of the pre-liberalization period than the post-liberalization period. We need a faster rate of economic growth. Economic growth is the answer to many of our socio-economic problems. India today is a $2.7 trillion economy. Perhaps India is the fifth or the sixth largest economy in the world. And many people talk about the Indian economy becoming a $5 trillion economy by 2025. I can say that by 2025 this is almost impossible, because we have lost 1 year this year. This year the growth is negative, and perhaps next year the growth will be enough only to compensate the fall in the growth rate in the current year. Therefore, virtually by the end of 21-22, we will be where we were at the end of 2019-20. In fact, if we need to reach the level of $5 trillion economy, calculations will show that the Indian economy will have to grow at least at 8 to 9% for 6 consecutive years. Only then we will be able to do it. As I said earlier, we are the fifth or the sixth largest economy. But in terms of per capita income, we are not. In terms of per capita income, which is $1,800 as far as India is concerned, is really in the bottom 1/3 of the nations. Calculations will show that if India is to become a developed country, which means a per capita income of $12,000, it will take more than 2 decades. And in the 2 decades, we will have to grow at 8 to 9%. That is the challenge. That is really must be our effort. And only then we will be able to say we are, in a sense, reaching, growing at a level which will be consistent with our own goals, with our own ideas. Then the question is, what should be done in order to be able to do this? I will summarize it in 2 or 3 sentences. One thing that is happening is that the investment rate is falling. India's investment rate was 38% or above some 8 years ago or 9 years ago. It has come down to about 30% now. We need to revive the investment rate. The investment rate must go up. Investment is a key to economic growth. It is largely dependent upon economic factors, but non-economic factors also count. We need social cohesion also in order to create the environment in which investment will happen. Second, we need to carry the reform agenda further. The liberalization period has shown that India's economy can grow fast, and therefore we should certainly do that. But the reforms now should focus on specific sectors like power, telecom, banking, and governance, and introduce such measures which are necessary to accelerate economic growth. There's a lot of talk about employment. But employment will come only when there is growth. Employment is not something, an objective which is different from the objective of growth. One thing is also important, and which links it with the world at large. Exports are key to economic growth, and exports of India are also dependent upon what is happening in the rest of the world. Unfortunately, there is a trend in recent times of a retreat from what we call globalization. Many of the developed countries are thinking in terms of moving away from free trade. That is an unfortunate thing. I think the developed nations, whichever a nation is doing it, is doing a very unwise thing. And theory can tell you that free and unfettered freedom of international trade is largely in the interest of all nations. Of course, there are some constraints or some restrictions, but free and fair trade is important. I think the developed countries are also facing a problem. Their growth is very low. Their employment is not picking up. And there is the added problem of new technology that is coming up, like artificial intelligence. Since we are talking about uncertainties in the summit, I think we should really need to focus also on new technologies that are coming, which are in a sense largely replacing human labor by machine. The earlier inventions substituted the human hands and the body, but the new inventions are substituting the human brain, and therefore there is a problem. But then the answer to it does not lie in restricting free trade. I will not go into the other issues. There are key issues such as environment. We really need to balance the need for growth and the need for environmental protection. We talk of uncertainties. We live in a world which is full of uncertainties. A good example is COVID-19. Nobody thought a year ago that we will all be facing a pandemic like that. The only way in which we can deal with uncertainties is to build a strong, resilient economy. Even in the case of COVID-19, it is clearly seen those countries which have had a good medical delivery system have been in a position to take care of the problem much better than other countries. Before I conclude, I will say a few words about Tamil Nadu, in which this particular summit is being, from which the summit is being organized. I chaired a committee very recently, which was asked to look at what needs to be done in order to accelerate growth and development of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is an industrialized state. It is a state where for the last 3 decades, the rate of growth has been higher than the national rate of growth. It is highly urbanized. So these are some of the advantages that this state possesses. But then we need to grow faster also. We need to take care and eradicate poverty. And therefore, we need to look at what has to be done in the field of agriculture, industry, social sector, and so on. For example, in the field of agriculture, we probably need to move from highly water-intensive cultivation to cultivation which is lower water intensive. We need to organize farmers, producers groups because the average land holding in this state is also becoming smaller and smaller. In the case of industry, we need to develop integrated towns, industrial towns. We need to set up industrial parks, and we need to reserve in these things certain areas and certain sectors for the medium and small scale industries. We must strengthen the Tamil Nadu Industrial and Investment Corporation by providing a larger capital, say 1,000 crores, so that it may be in a position to provide the required capital to particularly the medium and small industries. I can go on, and I think the report lists a large number of recommendations. In the case of the social sector, once again, we must develop a decentralized medical delivery system. In fact, a decentralized medical delivery system would have also taken care of the problems like COVID-19 in a better way. There's a lot to be said, but I must come to the end, and therefore I will not elaborate on the various recommendations. Therefore, a strong economy with a concern for vulnerable groups must be our goal. As somebody put it, we must combine the passion for growth with compassion for the poor. That is, we must emphasize both equity and efficiency. Equity and efficiency should not be posed as opposing considerations. They must be weaved to produce an acceptable pattern of development. Therein lies economic wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rangarajan. I think words of wisdom, and I think almost everything Dr. Rangarajan said, makes a lot of sense, resonates very well with us. All the policies, we are very, very fortunate that we have people like Dr. Rangarajan advising, Government of Tamil Nadu. Thank you very much, Dr. Rangarajan, for having given this fantastic speech. So, next is another wonderful speaker that we have, another person who needs absolutely no introduction, the Honorable MP from Tirunelveli, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, born in London, actually, studied in St. Stephen's, Delhi, has a doctorate from the Tufts University Fletcher School of Diplomacy. I understand he was one of the youngest professors there as well, served in the United Nations for 29 years and almost became the Secretary General, former Minister of State for HR and External Affairs, author, 19 books that he's written, contributed to the Indian Express, Newsweek, New York Times, you name it. And of course, his latest book is called Battle of the Belonging, released in October. So very, very happy that we had Dr. Shashi Tharoor. So I had the privilege of speaking to Dr. Shashi Tharoor recently. So let's hear what Dr. Shashi Tharoor has to say. Please. Honorable MP, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, thank you so much for making time this evening to come and see us. Your presence is really going to make a big difference for the audience. We have a whole lot of people. We're hoping it will be, between 6,000 and 10,000 people. We don't know exactly how many it is, but it's quite a number. I think we've crossed 6,000. So I'm sure you're going to be, enlightening all of them with what you have to say. I must tell you, you are our, how do I put it, star speaker. It goes without saying. But it really helped us with getting the participants, to come in. I don't think they were very much interested in just the UEF, but you coming in, I think has made all the difference. So thank you so much, Dr. Shashi, for making time to come and see us today. Just want to give you a quick, background about the UEF. We are a Chennai-based forum. About 450 members. We are hoping to take it to about 1,500 members soon. And quite simply put, our agenda is to see how we can support Tamil Nadu, South India, India to sort of, and our stakeholders grow at 1.5x. Quite simply put, somebody making 100 rupees, can we take it to 150? Somebody making 10,000, can we take it to 15,000? And just sort of keeps going on and on. So that's our agenda in a nutshell. So without taking too much time for the introductions, so let me just come straight into the topic of today's discussion, which is on top of everybody's mind, right? Uncertainty, pandemic, COVID, vaccine, Biden, Trump. I mean, you open the newspaper and it's like, that's it. First 3 pages are talking all about that. So I must sort of indulge you with that. So, new president in the White House after, somebody said I shouldn't say turbulent years, but 4 years, whatever we want to call it.
Very turbulent years.
And then multiple vaccines coming in, I think we're hitting upon so many vaccines coming in. So what do you think is in store? I mean, we've got a new president who's coming in on my birthday, January 20th.
Oh,
and
congratulations.
I believe he's got a fantastic lineup of cabinet members.
Yeah.
We've got, multiple vaccines coming up, and whatnot. So what's going to happen next year? What's your take, 2021? What's in store for us?
Well, I think that obviously the expectation with President Biden, President-elect Biden, is that it'll be a bit of a return to normal. That the turbulence, the impulsive 3 a.m. tweeting, the rather dramatic statements emerging from the man in the White House, the somewhat erratic policy actions, you bomb Syria one day, you forget about it the next, all of these things will subside and you'll have a very calm and mature hand at the helm of the leading superpower on the planet, and that's the expectation from the Biden side. But I would argue that while that's good, and it's good that America may not any longer be a source of geopolitical instability, some of the trends we have seen during this last year and during the 4 years of Trump are not going to disappear, Ahmed. I mean, certainly, I think there's no question that the rivalry between the US and China that intensified under Trump and that led during COVID, during the pandemic, to talk of decoupling and so on, has created a very different dynamic. And even if we are, it's always wrong to draw simple parallels with the Cold War again, like the one with the Soviet Union, because China and the US are far more closely imbricated into one another than the US and the Soviet Union ever were. Nonetheless, something approaching, if not a Cold War, certainly not a war and peace, is going to follow. So that's going to be a very major defining geopolitical feature of the next few years. The larger concern that I would have is that I think what the pandemic seems to have given us is an irresistible movement towards deglobalization. I share your ambitions for Southern India, Tamil Nadu, growth and all of that. But if we were expecting to do that in the kind of context of the globalized economy that we took for granted from about 1991 in India from the reforms and 1918 the rest of the world till about 2010, well, that I think is now pretty much gone, because the pandemic seemed to confirm for many that in times of crises, people rely on their governments to shield them. It showed people that global supply chains are vulnerable to disruption, therefore unsustainable, that dependence on foreign countries for essential goods like pharmaceuticals, or even the ingredients that go into making pharmaceuticals, can be really a problem. And therefore, many countries, you talked about the vaccines, look at the way in some of the richer countries are trying to corner the larger number of vaccines for themselves. Already at the beginning, we saw them acquiring medicines and supplies for their own people at the expense of each other. There's already a rush to reset global supply chains and raise trade barriers. And with all of this emphasis on more protectionism, more national interest, more self-reliance, and Mr. Modi's call for an Atmanirbharta echoes that here in India, then I think that the desire to get more and more manufacturing and production chains back home or closer to home on the part of every country is going to give us a very deglobalized economy. And that, I think, will change the atmosphere in which we are all seeking to grow and prosper.
Great. That's going to be quite a different world next year then. Everyone is going to be very different from what we've had all these years from what you're saying. I personally think I'm an eternal optimist. I'm really hoping that, this crisis and with the new administration coming in, it really will be positive. We have to be positive. I'm sure you'll agree that we have to continue to be positive. So let's wait and see what happens. So my next question, Pax Indica.
Right.
I've got the book here. Right.
Oh, delighted.
I wish I was with you because I would have got a signed copy of this. Sorry, I'm not able to see it. I do have a copy.
Thank you. Great. Right. Delighted.
Yeah. So I must confess that I haven't read it entirely, but yes, I have got the gist of what you're trying to say. Soft power. Right. So I think that's the essence of what you're saying. So what do you think we can do in India to leverage on the soft power? Because you keep talking about, that we have to take advantage of the soft power. We should really be, using it to our maximum advantage. How does India take advantage of, what's happening in the globe right now? Okay, I mean, I hate to say this. I was actually born in Hong Kong, so I'm a bit of a Chinese, a bit Chinese myself. Having said that. How can India take advantage of this sort of, anti-Chinese sentiment, if I can use that word? And
well, listen, all I can say is that when I wrote the book, of course, it was a very different India.
Yep.
Because soft power is essentially the power of attraction, power of culture, the power of the fact that, you see, hard power is what you actually exercise through military muscle, economic muscle. Hard power is the kind of traditional attributes of power that most people see. Whereas soft power is precisely what makes you attracted to others. So when people hear your country's name, they want to be with you, they want to like you, they want to associate themselves with you because it's so attractive. Now, India's soft power was based on some of these things. Of course, there were cultural products like everything from fashion to Indian cuisine to yoga, Ayurveda, Bollywood films, all of that. And there was also the extraordinary attraction of our values. We were such a remarkable example of the management of diversity in a multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, multicultural, multi-religious democracy. And no country in the world had our kind of diversity, and yet we were able to manage it together through cooperation, coexistence, and so on, that the world considered a remarkable success. When I say the world, I don't just mean the Western democracies. Even I've spoken to many African heads of state and government who are full of admiration. They said, when you look at India, we feel inspired that, if you can overcome all these challenges and diversities and succeed, so can we. That's why we look to you for leadership and guidance. That's the sort of feedback I was getting. I fear that a Western country with the usual regard for democracy and human rights is bound to feel that the old free pass that India used to get, whatever our failures were, whatever our limitations were, however bloody minded we might have been, the counter answer always was that we are a liberal democracy. Look at India, they're much more like us. They're not like China because they're so different and they've made such an effort to be democratic and to take people along and be so humane. We have to give them a pass on some of these other failures. Today, there's going to be a disinclination to give us a pass. And that's very worrying. I mean, for example, Mr. Biden in his campaign has made a big fuss about democracies. And he said that in his first few months in office, he intends to convene a global summit of democracies. And India was expected to be a star player in that. If India goes and people talk about what makes a democracy a viable democracy.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what a lot of people think. And but on a side note, our PM seems to be a rock star, to say the least. The way, actually speaking, to just going back to the soft power, taking away all other items, the way he's been marketing India globally. Personally, I think it's been phenomenal. But then we'll leave that for another day. Let me just indulge you on another question.
Sure.
We are talking about soft power, and then my son lives in London.
Okay.
And we keep debating about food. We are big foodies in the family. And so what really took him and me by surprise is the number of Malayali restaurants, Kerala restaurants, all over London. I mean, I was in school there many years ago. And at that time, we had to go around, find the appam restaurant, and then, see where they're going to serve our appam and fish curry or whatever. But now it's, become a bit of a, gourmet sort of food, and you find, Kerala restaurants everywhere. And I think if I read your book right, I mean, this is the soft power we're talking about, right?
That's part of it. That's very much part of it, and that's
Yeah.
marvelous. I actually have mentioned that, in fact, that the Indian restaurants in the UK
Yeah.
actually employ more people than the shipbuilding, coal mining, and iron and steel industries combined. So,
Oh, is
so
that
the
right?
empire has struck back as far as food is concerned, restaurants are concerned.
Yeah, so that's quite
In fact,
something.
when the late Foreign Secretary Robin Cook was asked what is the national dish of England, and people were wondering whether he would say haggis or Yorkshire pudding or steak and kidney
I
pie,
think, was it?
he said curry tikka masala. Yeah, he said chicken tikka masala.
Tikka masala. Tikka masala. Yeah. So let me just take you to the UN a bit now. I believe that you were there for almost 30 years. And
29, but yes, you're right.
29, 30, yeah. So just wanted to ask you this. We've been following the UN SDG personally from the UEF. We fully support the UN SDG. Our companies, we support the UN SDG. How relevant is it? I mean, is it something, our Aam Aadmi, is he going to benefit with the UN SDG? How relevant is the United Nations for India? Or should we even bother about the UN?
No, Ahmed, listen, the relevance is not the problem with the SDGs because the governments of the world have settled on these goals themselves.
Right.
So they are speaking for their own Aam Aadmis and their consensus. We had the Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015. And when that 15-year period expired, a new set of targets was agreed by governments based on their experience of the previous 15 years, and that's the SDGs. And this goes on to be achieved till 2030. And it's all the classic things the Aam Aadmi is concerned about: poverty alleviation, illiteracy eradication, maternal health and mortality, public health generally, sanitation. I mean, all the classic development paradigms that affect human beings and human welfare are in the SDGs. So relevance is not the problem. They're very, very relevant. And what is more, they are made relevant by the fact that they're not conceived by some outside body somewhere in the sky. They're actually agreed upon after negotiation by governments. So there, the question to some degree is off. The question is, does the UN, SDGs or otherwise, does the UN directly affect the lives of ordinary people? I think it is true that in a very large country like India, the UN only becomes a sort of McKinsey of development. It can give you a consultancy role for the government and share some of the best practices around the world, give you some idea of what the global agenda is. But the UN doesn't get involved in working on the ground, some grassroots village level anymore. That is really left to the Indian government, the Indian agencies, Indian NGOs, and so on to do.
Right. So just staying on the UN a little bit.
Yeah.
29 years in the United Nations, right? So how does somebody who spends 29 years come back to Thiruvananthapuram, win the election, 3 terms? And I mean, sorry for asking this so bluntly, but how does somebody like you fit into the fabric of Kerala? I mean, I'm not able to fathom how that works, right? Was it a culture shock? Was it, for the voters, maybe? I don't know. Is it for you or for them? I don't know.
No. In fact, there was multiple levels of culture shock because, in fact, my parents are from a different part of Kerala, Palakkad district, closer to that side of the Tamil Nadu border, whereas Thiruvananthapuram. But I chose Thiruvananthapuram to contest because it was the state capital, and I wrongly assumed that the more educated, well-read people might vote for me because of shall we say, my books had been translated into Malayalam. I was more likely to be familiar to more newspaper readers and so on. In fact, that turned out to be a different story. But coming back to this, so it was a culture shock in switching from America to India, within India, from the environs of Delhi or Mumbai or Calcutta, where I'd grown up, to Kerala, where I had never lived except on holidays, and within Kerala, so triple culture shock between the district I was familiar with, which was actually the one my parents and we as children would visit annually in Palakkad, and the city of Thiruvananthapuram, which I had only previously visited once before, like a tourist. So all of these were culture shocks. But you know what was interesting was that the question that you asked, which is entirely fair, was precisely the tactic that my opponents in the first election were principally the communists. Now my principal opponents are the BJP, but in those days it was a communist-held seat. The two previous elections had been won by the Communist Party of India, and so they took the line. How can this man seek your votes? Who is he? He's only used to living in three-piece suits and air-conditioned offices, and he is completely unfamiliar with your needs and your problems. How can he presume to represent you? And what is more, his Malayalam is atrocious. You know, he hasn't spoken it properly for 30 years.
He's a Tamilian.
No, not a Tamil.
He's really a Tamilian.
They were more concerned that I was a New Yorker as far as they were. So I said to the people, you know, because I had picked up adequate Malayalam in the course of annual holidays and so on. I said to people, listen, this is my background. First of all, I gave the lie to all the three-piece suit, air-conditioned office stuff by being dressed as I comfortably am in a munda and jubba in South Indian clothes. The hottest days and hottest times of the hottest days and the hottest month of the year, because the election campaigns have been March, April in 2009 and 14. And therefore, those are the hottest months of the year. And so I said, listen, you can see that I am very comfortable talking to you, finding out your needs and problems. And you know what? They're right that my Malayalam isn't as good as theirs. I can't make these wonderful sort of rodomontade speeches in Sahitya Malayalam. But you know what? I have, as you can see from my talking to you, I have enough Malayalam to understand your needs, your hopes, your problems. And more important, I have the English and the Hindi needed to express them effectively in the national parliament.
Absolutely.
That kind of completely destroyed the argument against me, because it was very easy to point out that these fellows might be very comfortable in Kerala, but the job they were electing the MP for was to be done in Delhi.
Right.
And there I was bound to be more effective. And I am pleased to say I won with a record majority, which I have been able to, the majority went down in the next election in the Modi wave. But in the current, the 2019 election, the most recent one, I was able once again to return to those levels of majority. So I'm pleased to say that there is a certain, shall we say, commitment to me and support for me on the part of the electorate. And I must say that I've become very comfortable in Thiruvananthapuram. I've already decided that when I think of a retirement, and I will have to start building a retirement home before too long, because I don't have one, it's going to be there, because it's very comfortable there. I feel very accepted there now. And there's a lot of wonderful virtues to that lovely city. It's near the sea. It's got a pleasant enough climate. And at the same time, unlike a place like Kochi, it's not already choking and congested with traffic. It's still a manageable state capital, small town with 20-minute drive from almost anywhere in the city to the airport, to a hospital, to the port, etc. So though I'm trying to bring a lot of development to the place, and so population will grow and infrastructure will grow, at the same time, I think it's a very comfortable place to see out the rest of my innings in. So I'm very happy to say that I have now become a true Trivandrumite. I'm a Thiruvananthapuram Nivasi.
But Trivandrumite.
Absolutely.
Right. You must have frequented Villa Maya. It's one of my favorite restaurants.
It is. In fact, it's one of the best restaurants in the States and possibly in the country. So we go to Villa Maya quite often. I'm a regular there.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. I love that restaurant as well. So we've got a lot of youth here watching us in today, Dr. Shashidharu. So what's your advice for them? Is this going to be? I've got this sort of belief that in the next 30 years, and of course you've been talking about the looters, right? And the fantastic speech that you gave in 2015 in Oxford, how can anybody forget that? Is the empire going to strike back? I personally really wish it does happen in the next 30 years. A position that we had, 500 years ago, 400 years ago, 1/3 of the global economy. Figures are saying that we may, reach that position again in the next 30 years. So what's in store for our youth? What do you think they should be doing? What should the youth in South India be doing, in India be doing, so that we really take advantage of this sort of mega wave which is coming in? Probably it wasn't there in your time, in my time, but in the next 30, 40 years, it certainly is going to be a wave. So what should they be doing?
I'd like to share your optimism. I'm sorry that you're asking the question on the very day in which it's been announced that we are officially in recession. So if we are going to get onto that kind of dramatic growth track, which had been expected and predicted at one time, then we are on the wrong path right now, and we'll have to do some really improved economic management on the part of the government to get us back on course. But let me just say that if indeed we are to go in the way in which you hope and I hope and most Indians would like to see our country prospering, I would say that the first and most important challenge is bound to be that we actually come up with economic policies that take advantage of the currents prevailing in the world. When it was globalization, that's one thing. In today's world, it may be a differently nuanced approach. Clearly, a lot of the future involves technological innovation, artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning. We can't afford to be behind the curve on that. Have to dramatically improve our education and skill levels. We have a demographic dividend potentially, because in the next 30 years that you mentioned, we will have the youngest and largest workforce in the world of people of working age, because already by next year, I think the studies show that we will have about 116 people in the job starting age group of 19 to 23, whereas China will only have 96 million people, 193 million people. So we will be way ahead of China in terms of this cohort that will grow up and work for the next 30 years. They'll only work effectively if we train, skill, and equip them to take advantage of the opportunities that the world offers and the world economy offers. So that's definitely something which I believe we need to do. And then finally, I would say that we also need a tremendous amount of flexibility on the part of our young people. There's a study from the Oxford Martin School that says that by 2030, 30% of the jobs that exist will be jobs that don't exist today. How do you prepare yourself for a job that doesn't exist today? What you do is you learn to think creatively, to think out of the box, to have a think in a problem-oriented way, to learn to handle unfamiliar data, unfamiliar information, but manage to come on top of it. Because essentially, learning skills for yesterday's jobs is not going to give you any particular opportunity to do well in tomorrow's jobs. And that kind of flexibility, which is often not sufficiently present in our education system, is something that the young will have to really find and develop in themselves. Those are the skills that will be required to be successful in the unpredictable, perhaps even unimaginable world that they will be living in and growing up in the next 25, 30 years.
Brilliant. So I don't want to take any more of your time, MP Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Half an hour is too short a time, as you can see. For somebody like you, I think we need a whole day to sit and discuss about things. And I sincerely hope that we'll be able to have you in one of our live events in the UEF. It'll be
in a post-COVID world.
In a post-COVID world, or even a summit with our education institutions where we've got lots of students. We'll talk about that at another time. But thank you so much. I really appreciate for having you taken the time, and I do look forward to meeting you sometime soon.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good speaking to you. All the best.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you so much, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. As you can see, that was an extremely interactive session with him, with loads of ideas. My sons, Mazen and Zain, greatly helped me with the interview. So I was facing the man himself, and so it was a bit intimidating. But thanks to my sons, I was a little bit more prepared to ask them some sort of questions. So anyway, now I know we're already running a bit short of time, but with our veteran speakers, I'm sure you'll all agree that we need to fully hear what words of wisdom they have to say. So next on our list of speakers is a veteran, again somebody who's going to speak to us from Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, Brother Ayman Sajini. He is a 24-year veteran in the banking sector. He's part of the $4 billion ICD of the Islamic Development Bank. He has worked in several banks, Barclays, ABN AMRO, Ibdar Bank, etc. And he studied at the Eastern Michigan University in the United States. So Brother Ayman was kind enough to agree to speak to us from Jeddah. So let's see what he has to say.
الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد. Your Excellencies, designated distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters. I am delighted to be speaking to all of you today from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. At the outset, I would like to thank the United Economic Forum and Brother Ahmed Buhari for inviting me to speak and for arranging the state-of-the-art virtual conference, which seems to be the norm going forward. The theme of the conference is Imagine a New Future, Create an Impact, and Inspire the Future. It's very much in tune with today's chaotic world. Growing during the uncertainty and the global Islamic economy is a topic that I have been requested to share my thoughts on, which I will attempt to do. Before I proceed, allow me to give you some background on my organization, the Islamic Development Bank Group and ICD, in which I am the CEO. The Islamic Development Bank is a Sharia-compliant multilateral development bank, MDB, headquartered in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. ISDB mandate is to support the social and economic development of our 57 member countries, with activities closely aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. The benefit of ISDB funding support goes to the society at large, as we strive to deliver impact at scale. We have a capital of over 70 billion and are present in 57 member countries. Meanwhile, ISDB private sector development arm with a capital of $4 billion. ICD's strategic goal is to be the key enabler of the private sector development in its member countries. In lending entrepreneurs support and addressing the need of our member countries' private sector as best we can. ICD emphasizes inclusive growing that leads to an expansion of opportunities that are accompanied by measures to ensure that the poor and disadvantaged are able to access these opportunities and which is growing through uncertainty and the state of the global Islamic economy. Firstly, to me, and I am sure to many of you, uncertainty seems to be the order of the day. We are witnessing and experiencing changes almost on a daily basis due to the fast evolving nature of the first global economic and pandemic in over 100 years, as the world grapples with the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Many lives and livelihood of the global population continue to be affected, especially for the low and middle income countries with fragile economic fundamentals. High incidence of poverty, food insecurity, normal employment, and low social security coverage. On the business front, the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, are particularly hard hit. In a very short time, the context in which MSMEs are operating in has changed drastically. This comes with a grave consequence. Sector accounts for more than 90% of the economic activities and over 50% of the world jobs. It contributes to more than 40% of GDP in developing countries. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that the business world must pay great attention to environmental and social and governance, ESG, risks to build greater resilience in their operation and supply chain. Indeed, the COVID-19 crisis is undoubtedly an opportunity for businesses to transform themselves and improve their long-term position. Recommitting to the sustainable and redesigned business model in post-COVID-19 recovery will not only speed the crisis or speed up transformative changes that reduces the risk of the future crisis, but it will create resilience, economies that advance sustainable development and focus on inclusive growth. Therefore, there is a silver lining. Moreover, and moving forward, I believe growth can be achieved even during this period of uncertainty if we stay focused on turning challenges into opportunities. We need to reimagine, realign our priorities, and reform to be prepared for the new norm. From a multilateral perspective, it is important to create awareness on what more resilient economies should look like in the future and ways we can support them. Distinguished guests, now let me share a broad overview of the global Islamic economics. Given the hard wind caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the volatility in oil prices, and the uncertain macroeconomic environment, the Islamic finance industry, which constitutes the bulk of global Islamic economy, faces an unprecedented challenge to its development. While the actual and the acute phase of crisis has eased considerably, where industry remains on high alert, underpinned by a large degree of uncertainty that looming over financial markets and institutions. A range of risks could threaten financial stability, such as speed of lockdown, easing for different countries, the effectiveness of government policies in mitigating losses in activity, and how households and firms will change their behavior in the medium to long term. Considering the fact that most Islamic economies experienced a positive growth rate even during the global financial crisis in 2008 to 2009. This reveals the extent of severity of the impact of the pandemic on them. To summarize, the recovery period in Islamic countries may be prolonged if commodity prices remain low, government and corporate debt grow further, and financial imbalances exacerbate due to possible extension of economic lockdown. On the bright side, accordingly to the annual state of the Global Islamic Economy Report 2020-2021, spending across Islamic economy sectors, excluding family-friendly travel, is forecasted to rebound by end of 2021, which will prop up growth and is slated to reach US $2.4 trillion by 2024, after recording 8% plunge in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has reminded us, the COVID-19 pandemic is a tragic reminder of how deeply connected we are. The virus knows no border and is a continuous global challenge. Combating it requires us to work together as one human family. Moving forward, while there is a challenge, There are certainly unique prospects to steer the world back on track towards a sustainable future. Now more than ever, the importance of enhancing economics and trade ties to confront our shared challenges must not overlook, as it can unlock opportunities and help shape more resilience and inclusive society. Now with COVID-19 pandemic taking center stage, countries are recognizing and reconsidering their approaches to collaboration and cooperation and ways that they can take collective action on all fronts to withstand the storm and support growth. With India slated to become a US dollar 27 trillion economy from a US dollar 2.7 trillion now, and Tamil Nadu from US dollar 270 billion to 2.7 trillion, opportunities are abundant for us to collaborate. For example, businesses in India and the GCC countries have a strong relationship, which has been supported by institutional mechanisms like the Indian GCC SME Business Council and the GCC India Industrial Forum. India also has businesses councils in most of these countries. Coming from a multilateral perspective and based on our experience, deepening economic partnerships will pay dividends. It gives people a tangible interest in each other's economic well-being. It opens up access to a multitude of opportunities and provides a means to growth. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of ICD and myself, I want to thank UEF once again for inviting me. We now eagerly look forward to closely exploring avenues we can jointly work on with the UEF, supporting 45 educational institutions affiliated to the UEF with about 130,000 students and a possible 4,500 companies is certainly an interesting area on which we are keen to discuss with the UEF. Wishing you all a great day and interesting summit. And thank you very much again. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and Namsati. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful speech, Brother Ayman. We thoroughly enjoyed what you had to say about the economies. So thank you very much. So we're running